All right, not ideal, but I think this will be good. All right, so what I'm going to talk about is exploring visible light effects on silicon, like as in computer chips. And basically, I want to do this to kind of explore security implications of this. In particular, like if you have a protected microcontroller and you want to analyze the firmware on it, this is one technique you may use to get the firmware out of that microcontroller. And I hadn't really done this before, and so I thought I would choose a few old, like first-generation secure microcontrollers to get a little bit of experience with this. And so the basic idea is that if you get any sort of photons that have more energy than the band gap of silicon, which is like, I don't know, it's like 1100 nanometers or something like that, you actually can start flipping bits in the silicon. You know, other things we'll do too, like you theoretically could do, you know, like high energy particles or something, but you know, visible light's just a lot easier to work with. And so just to give kind of a demo of this, if we are able to, so I'm going to move this over. So what I've got here to demonstrate this is I have a EEPROM reader, and what it's doing is just looping, reading a microcontroller here. Say like dump the firmware, and display it on the screen here. And so what I'm going to do is bring a light over to it, and you can see as I bring it over, the memory array starts to glitch and show up on the screen there because the bits start flipping from the cell phone light. And so that's the basic idea is, you know, this sort of light like that can flip bits. Now we just need to flip a very interesting bit and not flip any of the bits that we don't care about. Like we want to get a clean firmware dump without corrupting it from all this sort of light spilling over. So a little bit of background. So, oops, we can get over here. So this is kind of the equipment that I'm going to mostly be using for this. So this is called a laser probe station, and in particular on it, there's like a high-power pulsed laser that can be used to deliver like a quick, high-energy blast to the chip for like a really strong, quick glitch. And then I've also taped a more powerful, like continuous, almost like a laser pointer to the side of it. And then there's kind of like a motorized XY stage on this that I can use to kind of like move around and scan different parts of the chip. And we'll talk a little bit more about those in a second. Safety, we don't need to talk about that. So a lot of these chips have like a UV erasure sort of window. So part of the reason why they were chosen was it's really easy to just kind of expose the silicon. But just to kind of reduce some effects of the window distorting, I took a milling machine and just kind of like carved out this quartz window to get more direct access to the dies. And there'll be two chips I'll be targeting, which are like first generation-ish. The left one is a 8751, if you happen to be familiar with like MCS 51, 8051. And then the right chip was a PIC 16C57. So starting with the 8751, we'll gloss over details, but basically it has code readout security. That's kind of the key point here. And there's a bunch of different types of them, and we'll be talking about a few. But the key point is the ones at the top are like, gosh, I don't forget. They're like NMOS or PMOS, and then the bottom ones are CMOS. That's what that C is in the part numbers. And then for the PIC, basically same idea. It's there's some more interesting details, but basically early secure microcontroller. And the reason why I chose the PIC was because a friend of mine had actually done some work, and so if I ran into problems, I figured like, okay, I would just bug my friend. Unfortunately, he did the one on the right, which was the 57C, and I had the 57, and so they actually turned it out to be a completely different silicon layout, and so that didn't turn out to be any help, but whatever, it didn't really matter. And so the first thing I started playing with was trying to use this high-power laser. And so this is like a high-power pulse laser. Basically, you get like one type of light in, and it like has these special crystals that can convert it to other types of lights, and just do this like really quick laser blast, which you can use for like quick glitches. So maybe, for example, if you had like a loop that you wanted to skip over or something like that, it's a lot better for that sort of stuff when you want to glitch like a specific instruction. But theoretically, if there was like a flip-flop, like a memory storage that held like a value of like, oh, is code protection enabled, it might also be good to like flip something like that and disable the code protection. We can skip over that later. If we have time, I can show you what that looks like. But basically, like little light, like blasting on the chip. You see little green flashes. So the first thing I wanted to do as part of this was I said, okay, one of the key things, in addition to just glitching, this microscope can also shoot out UV light. So theoretically, in the 355 nanometer range. So theoretically, people will tell you that these EPROMs, which is like where the security fuse would be, will start erasing below 400 nanometer. So the 355 nanometer laser, theoretically, I should be able to erase the security fuse. Unfortunately, I just like shot this thing overnight at basically just below damaging the chip, and it still didn't flip any bits in the memory. So this basically didn't work. In fact, you can even see I shot too hard there, and that's what that picture is. It actually blew a hole in the memory array. And then I also tried a UV lamp in kind of a similar wavelength and just let it sit for a while, and it doesn't flip any bits. So you really need weeks or something like that if you're going into these sort of ranges. So not going to work, unfortunately. So the next thing I try to do is just do a glitch where I just XY scan, try to different locations on there. I got a few things to kind of glitch the chip a little bit, but nothing that was exploitable. But I decided I'd try something else. So I tried the pick next, and this one was a lot more optically active. So that map on the right was a bunch of locations that kind of did something, read out something on the EPROM reader. Unfortunately, nothing was exploitable on this either that I found, but it looked like there was a lot of potential there. So if I played with it a little bit more, maybe could find something. And eventually, I think I hit something, as put the chip into latch up, and it just fried itself because it drew too much power. But yeah, it was kind of fun. So the next thing I said was, okay, let's try these laser pointers. So first thing I said was, okay, I've got this really high power laser that you use for eye surgery or something like that. And in the high power pulse laser, there's a targeting laser port that goes through the microscope. So first thing I did was I shot it into that fiber that you can see there and just kind of projected it onto the die. But unfortunately, there's just a lot of losses in this system, so the actual amount of power that went onto the chip was very low, and I wasn't able to get anything to actually flip on the chip. And in fact, the other thing too is there's a safety system in this laser, so it doesn't blind the operators, and that also filtered out additional stuff. So basically no light almost went to the chip. So next thing I did was I said, okay, well, I'll just tape a laser pointer basically to the side of the microscope because that's pretty easy, and then I don't have to worry about these filters or anything like that. And so this didn't do anything yet on the PIC 16. It did get some interesting results. I got this kind of weird hex thing read out. I don't know if that was the programmer glitching from this process though, or something actually on the chip. But it does show up in the firmware when you shine on certain locations on the die. So kind of interesting. So maybe if I get bored at some point, I'll dig into that a little bit more. Same thing, 8751. I couldn't get for the NMOS PMOS. I didn't get anything. However, when I moved to the CMOS version of this part, it actually did at certain locations. You actually were able to just bypass code protection and actually would just flat out dump the firmware. So I was pretty happy that after getting a lot of these failures, that finally one of these parts actually did work. And using the microscope, could scan around and find the specific locations where these would go. And I had a little demo when I did this before, but unfortunately I didn't bring any death lasers with me, which is good because you all get to keep your eyesight. So, this kind of works out for both sides. So in the future, I was hoping to try a few other things where I did a little more precise scanning. I didn't get a chance to do that, and try out some other wavelengths, maybe green light will work better than red light. I haven't really tried anything like that. But anyways, yeah, so in summary, so the CMOS version kind of breaks. 8751 got some interesting results, but nothing that actually killed it. Or actually read out code. Few different results. But yeah, mostly happy that I got at least one of these to work with basically a laser pointer. Although not everything worked, the amount of time to execute these attacks was very short. Anyways, so thanks for listening and hope you found that interesting.